I think it's personally very important in a sort of thriller or death game or anything like that to like show how serious the stakes are. Deep down, I think most people kind of want to see like some tough decision making. It makes you feel like, oh god, this is not an easy thing to do. It's a good thing to have your main character at odds with someone that they really care about and like having to decide, can they save the other person? If not, who's more important?
Hello and welcome to the Mystery Gamedev Podcast, where we cross-examine the developers of mystery-themed video games and investigate the skills it takes to make one yourself. Today's guest is Kenneth Everette Norris, also known as ZetaKen, the creator, writer, and programmer of the Game of Fourtune. He is also the writer of the award-winning murder mystery visual novel Reaplaced. Ken is currently working on a new project, a sequel to the Game of Fourtune, named to be announced soon. Welcome, Ken. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I actually just got back from a trip in Canada a couple of days ago, and I had to deal with a whole bunch of other weird stuff with my condo after I came back. But we'll save that for another time or later in the podcast if there's more time. It's just annoying stuff like that. But yes, I'm doing great.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I hope your trip was enjoyable, and you're back to the land of working on video games, I guess, or...
That and my usual 9 to 5.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I shouldn't be so nervous, right? I've talked with you so many different times before now.
I promise you, I don't bite.
And we've gotten to know each other quite well over the past year or so. But I am very excited to sit down with you and other game developers and get to know you guys on a personal level, which I think I've gotten to know you quite a bit over the past year or so. But I really want to, share that with everyone, right? And publish these so that everyone gets to know you guys. There's not really been much of a spotlight on mystery game developers compared to other types of video game developers. And that's why I'm so excited, because we'll get to show people this side of the game development world that they don't normally get to see. So go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about the Game of Fourtune, your game. What is it? What kind of game is it? And why they should play it?
All right. This is great. All right. So the Game of Fourtune is a thriller mystery death game that I made, or I released about a year and a couple months ago. It essentially is telling the story of two characters, Clyde and Devin, who have unfortunately gotten themselves roped into a supernatural killing game, and they are essentially trying to find a way to survive it, figure out the whole ordeal of this mysterious cult that is responsible, or at least working in some capacity alongside this weird death game. And you should check it out if you love multiple rounded games, a wide cast of diverse characters, extremely long games. Some people enjoy a long burn. Fantastic music by composer Jeff Penny. And just if you want to support a game developer who thinks they made a pretty cool game that's primarily inspired by the likes of Danganronpa, Ace Attorney, but also Alice in Borderland and Mario Party. You'll see those. If you're familiar with those titles, then you'll likely see the influences in those games. And if not, check those ones out. Probably already know Mario Party, but Alice in Borderland, wonderful. Not quite a death game, but a thriller with a lot of sort of, I guess I'd call them sort of mini games that explore a lot of game theory and different ways for how you can utilize different game ideas in what I think would work really well in a death game scenario. So hopefully that wasn't too long of an overview of the general game. But
no, we're definitely going to touch on some of those topics.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about and only so much time, so we'll see what we can get through. Now, every review of the Game of Fourtune that I've seen has been not just positive, but really, really positive. So that's really an impressive feat on its own. People have a lot of good things to say about this game, and it's a very long game. I've not
Hmm.
completely finished it yet. I have only finished the first route at the moment, and maybe we'll get into talking about that a little bit toward the end as well. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the game has a flowchart that shows you every branching path, and it looks to me like there are 16 different routes, each with their own ending. And to me, that looks like a lot of content. Is that right for the number of endings, or is that around the number?
Yes, there's 16 routes, a lot of content to go through, so you will not have to worry about being short on interactions and stuff throughout the game. There's a lot to go through. I personally think it's one of the strong points of the game, actually.
I was actually pretty impressed by the fact that, like, even when the flowcharts essentially branch out when you pick different doors to go through, a lot like the Zero Escape series, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second here. And even within those doors, there are choices to be made. And what was really impressive to me was the fact that even when you make different choices within those, um, there are basically different story elements going on. Like all of your choices actually give you new experiences, even within those elements. So you might be playing in one of those death game scenarios, and the order in which things happens is different, and you still have to make decisions. And it's really the amount of detail that you put into every single choice actually making a difference, I think, is part of the strong point of that game. And I don't see that often with a lot of games that have loads and loads of choices in them.
Thank you. I kind of when maybe we'll save this for later, but generally the idea for some of those, I don't know what I call them, micro choices within certain paths is it's kind of fun in some ways to kind of see like, oh, what if I did X, Y, or Z for some of those, and then not just to be like, oh, what if, but sort of to show, oh, this is what this character is thinking, this is what they might do or react in a different situation. I like to look at it as a way of exploring, different characters and ideas that may be present, even if it doesn't necessarily change how a particular route may end. And without going into spoilers, there's a certain replayability that comes through that I think a lot of people may be able to enjoy. It's like, oh, I may have been on this particular route before, but let me try a different like set of choices and see how that turns out, and then have them be delightfully rewarded with, some maybe, you might get CG if you pick the right choices, or you'll just see some interesting dialogue, things like that. I always found it fun to like reward players for actually exploring what I did and make it not feel like, oh, I'm just doing it because I want them to, I don't know, 100% it. Make it fun, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things I always say is mystery game developers should be rewarding the player's curiosity. And that's definitely what you're doing when you create so many different choices and actually make all of them lead to different unique situations. So, I mean, that's a lot of content to work on. Was this your first game that you made, or because this is quite a big undertaking for someone's first game, or have you worked on other things before this?
So yes and no. I'll say it was the first. It's my first commercial game ever. I'll put it that way. But I've had sort of a lot of writing experience writing mystery games and choices in the past. I used to make Ace Attorney fan games on a website called Ace Attorney Online, which I think it's still there, but there's another website called Ace Attorney Online. It's more like a chat room or scene, something like that. But essentially, I had got a lot of my experience sort of writing out those kind of scenarios um, in the past. They would have competitions where you would see if you could make a case in a month. So I would like try and write out as much dialogue, try and like create like a case and present it and script it and all that, including sprites and that. So I had a bit more experience on that end, and I worked a little bit in Renpai before, but honestly, I actually learned a huge amount just with this game on like the inner workings of Renpai, of how to orient and move different like elements within scenes and sprites and music and all sorts of things. So it's not quite my first game. but it was my first time sort of having to make what I would consider a really relatively polished product for people to enjoy.
And as far as like choosing the scope of the game, because I know I'm a very ambitious game developer. I know a lot of people in the mystery game dev world who are ambitious. Was there a clear inspiration for like making such a big game with so many different choices and branching paths compared to some other kind of game?
Sort of. So, I got inspired to make the Game of Fortune because I played Themis's the Zodiac Trial, and that game also had a lot of choices. And I thought, okay, I like this game. It seems within the scope of my ability. Let me try and make something like that. And then the sort of concept for how I would sort of script out the content of it all was that it was going to be a game with the gimmick sort of would be there's a big emphasis on four. I'm like, okay, how can I make that work? Well, you can have four characters go down, uh, in games that have some combination of 0 to 4 deaths, have 4 rounds, and then okay, I'm like, okay, so you'll need probably 16 characters, and the way sort of pathing out the routes, so like I had to make like a little, literally like my own personal like flow chart to literally scope out each sort of game that the routes would be in, and who lives, who dies, what kind of developments there are. So it was extremely ambitious, and it after I made the first route, I was thinking, I could chop these out in about a month's time, mostly scripted. But doing that like 16 times and then having to do edits on edits for things like typos, bugs, definitely a bit ambitious. But we say a lot to start small, and I certainly that's Jeff, but it's also something for um, if you do something that you're super ambitious of, you're super want to like try out, even if you don't, complete it, even if you fail, even if it's not up to your expectations, you more often than not learn a lot. And some people would say, "Oh, you should use those in your smaller games." And I think what people should also be able to do is use your ambition and your drive to kind of fuel you as far as you can, and whatever cool ambitious project. Maybe you won't finish it, but maybe you'll learn so much more that the next time you go about it in maybe a couple of years' time, or after you've got more experience under your belt, um, you'll be able to carry that experience, and like you'll know what you really want to like make that dream project like carry out the best it can be. Um, I'm a bit long-winded, but
No,
hopefully that answered the question.
no, I totally agree. Again, as someone who's worked on a very long and ambitious project and one that really uh, technically hasn't been finished yet, I'm still hoping to finish it one day, but I think that's a very good piece of advice, which is just that if it is too big of an undertaking, you can always just put it on hold and come back to it later. And when you gain more experience, maybe it'll become easier for you to finish. But you were in a pretty good situation where you did actually finish your game and it's gotten a lot of positive reviews. So that worked out for you really well. How long did it end up taking after all?
So it's a bit tricky because there was the development kind of came in two phases. The sort of initial phase where I was planning everything out, the characters, all that. I think that took around maybe 3 months, and then I started developing, and then I kind of stopped for a while just because life stuff. I had work, I had other things. I kind of worked on it, and I just kind of went no, didn't work on it for a fair bit. And then ironically enough, most of the development probably done in about around 9 months. So, but there was a gap. So I'd say like a year and 9 months, so around 2 years. And during that 9 month period, I was actually unemployed. So I really had no reason to not just, focus and put my nose to the wheel and just say, all right, I'm just going to do as much as I can while also searching for a job. It took me a while. So I'd say it took me the better part of about about 2 years, two and a few months, plus all the edits and things that I made along the way.
What would you say was the most difficult part of that journey, going from starting from scratch to finishing the game? The you know, getting down into the game development grind and going through and seeing it through.
There's a lot. Okay, so
All of it.
yeah, definitely all of it. I think personally for me, the hardest part was, funnily enough, kind of working on the UI and then making edits to my script. I'm a very, very fast writer, as you already know.
Hmm.
I can go from idea to draft to implement it into a script very quickly. The problem is if you have a very, 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 very large script and you're a very fast writer and you're prone to typos like I am, there's a lot of mistakes you have to go and fix up. So honestly, a lot of like some part of the month of development was just going back through the script and looking through screenshot, pun screenshot, pun screenshot of here's a typo, here's a typo, add a comma here, yada yada yada. There were some points where I'm like, God, I wish I couldn't like this. My editor had like a spell check or grammar check involved. Um, but that's sort of like a personal me thing. Other difficulties I sort of had was marketing, which was expensive and personally probably mm, it got eyes on it. Not enough to cover the cost of marketing and development, which honestly I kind of felt like it wasn't going to, but I was like, might as well try it anyway. Um, and it's definitely like the game's got good reviews. So at the very, I guess the marketing worked in that sense. But it's a sort of a culmination of um, sort of hoping that like when you release the game out, it's like, man, I hope like people enjoy it for what it is, and they don't just immediately look at all the flaws and it's not perfectly polished. It's there's a lot of things that a lot of seasoned developers or more practiced people have done, kind of getting over that kind of fear, just going, what, it's your first project. Most people don't even finish their projects. The fact that it's just out there means that it's good in a sense. It's complete. So those are kind of some of the challenges I went through. Thankfully, I was able to get most of the art without any issues. Getting music wasn't an issue. I'm a programmer, so I know sort of how to implement a lot of this stuff pretty basically. So yeah, most of the issues was just dealing with editings, typos, and marketing.
Yeah, and like you said, I totally agree that just getting a game out there and finishing it is an accomplishment in itself. Trying to make a profitable game business, especially in today's economy, is really, really, really hard. I definitely wouldn't underestimate that. So just finishing the game and making something that people enjoy, because there is a difference between making a game and making a good game, right? So it's one thing to finish a project, it's another to finish a project that lots of people enjoy, and you managed to do that as well. So whether or not your expenses add up a certain direction, that's a whole nother ball game that every game developer is struggling with right now. But I would certainly be proud of the fact that you made a game that a lot of people love, and people definitely want more. They're looking forward to more of that, and I think that's also a really cool thing from a certain standpoint, where you started working on this game because you were inspired by someone else's game, right? And
Yeah.
and you know now other people are probably getting inspired by your game, and they can begin their game development career as well. And it's just this thing where your project, no matter what stage it's in, whether you're just starting out or you've made 100 games before, you always have that level of influence to impact the world in a positive way. And I'm sure there's many people who will not just have very fond memories of the game, but will have some positive impact in their career, right?
Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you very much for all the kind, flattering words. I was gonna say like the biggest like compliment I could ever get is if someone said to me, "Hey, I started my game dev journey because I played your game. I was inspired. Like if I hear that, like I would just be like over the moon. I'd be like, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. That's really all it is. Like I really love helping like other devs like achieve whatever dream there is. Like I have no now that I'm in a financially stable situation, I enjoy like giving money out to Kickstarters for games for like not subscribing like whatever which like subscription services to kind of help them continue their games. Part of it's probably also a little bit of vanity because I'm like, yeah, that's right. But it's also just like there's so many cool people in our community that want to make some amazing games, and like if I can help them in any way, financially or just like give some cool ideas, or if they looked at my game and said, "Hey, I was inspired by what you did. Is it cool if no one said this, of course, but it'd be like if they just said that, yeah, I was inspired by my game, I'd be like, I've done my deed. I've done what I could for this community, and I can rest easy. But that's really all there is. I'm just happy to help however I can.
So I think this is a good time to ask this question, which I kind of have to ask because, my goal is to build a community of people who want to make video games, particularly mystery video games. And you particularly have been an incredibly strong supporter of Mystery Gamedev since literally day one. And, I cannot thank you enough for that. So what for you has been the best part about Mystery Gamedev as a community, and how would you like to see it evolve going forward?
The best part for me is that you're able to kind of meet like a whole slew of different kinds of developers. Like there's some people I wasn't really aware of. Like I knew of their games. Kind of nice to be able to just put a face or a voice or even just a text message to the person and see like, oh yes, they're human. Of course they go through struggles and they have triumphs, and they ask questions. People ask questions of us. We give answers, and to me, they like the strength of the community is being able to go and just ask like someone who's made a game or is interested in making a game. Hey, how do you approach X, Y, and Z? How do you guys like write your plots out? Do you draft? Do you make an outline? Do you get music from like? Do you plan your music out or do something else? It's like having a bunch of people who are like, yes, some are experienced and some are students, and we're all just trying to make some really cool games, and we can point at one another and say, hey, that's you like a game, try that one out. And so on and so forth. The way I'd love to see the sort of community grow, it's a good question. I guess what I'd love to see is a lot of sort of, how do I put this? I personally, again, this might be my vanity thing, but I think it'd be great if like other sort of people who are interested in making games have no fears or qualms, just like straight up asking people who've made games, hey, like how did you do X, Y, and Z on your particular game, or like being able to sort of probe the minds of people. Like maybe you could have us like, hey, I'll be doing an AMA about my game, here it is. Being able to give not constant, but sort of like an avenue for people to kind of probe a particular subject or topic. And because there's a lot of things I like to ask other people, and I can, as I'm kind of good, but I feel like other people might be a bit intimidated. It's like, oh, I'm not sure if I can ask them. They're too high in my. I know we're on the same group, but I've definitely been in that situation where it's like I can't ask them this question; they'll be too bothered. I'm not sure if that's a bit vague, but like I'm not sure if I call it like a spotlight, but like if people like signed up to just like take questions or answer things, kind of like you are with me,
right?
But in a more public forum.
Yeah.
It'd be a really great way to kind of, help the community kind of learn from one another.
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea of the way you describe it, hosting an AMA, Ask Me Anything kind of situation where maybe once every so often we can have seasoned developers, take an hour or two to answer questions from a crowd. That would be a very cool thing to do. I'm definitely very interested in educating people on what goes into making a mystery game, and that is definitely something that sounds like a good idea for the future. So we will go back to talking about Game of Fortune, but on the subject of Mystery Gamedev, you were also the writer for Replaced, which
Hmm.
it won third place in the 2023 Spooktober Visual Novel Jam, which was also the largest competitive visual novel jam ever with over 200 entries. And just to give our listeners some context, Replaced was our official Mystery Game Dev entry into the competition. So, in other words, I was also working on this project with you as a project manager. I didn't do any writing, that was all ZetaKen. But I saw your writing skills, and you wrote the whole 25,000 word script in like 1 week. And that was pretty amazing because it obviously ended up winning us third place in the competition. So, um, you know, I could immediately see then how you were able to write such a big game as Game of Fortune because you're just a fast writer, and it's not the kind of fast that's like fast and not good. It's fast and good, which you really can't get much better than that. So, you know, how did you learn to write so fast? How did you develop those skills? And is there like a secret to writing that way?
Okay, that's no one's asked it to me in that particular way, but I'll give my answer the best way I can.
Okay.
Um, the way I learned to write fast was sort of that a lot of the writing I do tends to be, at least for most visual novels, mostly dialogue, which means it's usually a conversation. An easy way to, so there's a sort of flow to it, as you know, you
Hmm.
can write it down, you can even say the words out loud as you're talking. The way to have a good conversation is you kind of imagine like a back and forth. You can imagine the lulls or the way that people speak. A lot of people might struggle with dialogue because it might go on for too long or it might sound like too short, too snappy. But I've been writing like sort of character dialogue for a long time now, both in like the old games like I used to make and in the visual novel stuff now. So when you get a sort of feel for that flow, it's very easy to kind of write like, oh, we'll just have two people talk. The descriptions also kind of just every once in a while I put in some exposition, but even that can kind of feel like a conversation between you and the player. So you can literally imagine yourself narrating to a person. That's usually sort of how it is anyway. Um, and the word, I guess the best, like the words sort of just kind of come out. Like as you speak, you don't usually think of like the next thing you just say. Like word, like, oh, I said the word, the next word comes is that. Like no one kind of thinks like they just sort of talk. So when writing, it's kind of like the same way. You kind of just maybe have an idea for what you want to do, and I just type in my, and maybe it's because I did turbo typing as a kid. I'm very good with my home row, and I'm able to type very quickly. Um, it makes it very easy to just kind of write very quickly without it making it sound, you know, bad or awkward, unless that's the intention. But I try not to. I try not to make things awkward for the reader unless the absolutely necessary. Um, so it's I think it's honestly just like a lot of practice. Like again, I've been writing for like a lot, many years, basically since I was like in middle school. So some of it might just be like, oh, you kind of get you like you know how you write in your own state, or whatever flow state it takes you to get there. When I'm in mine, you've seen I can blitz through an idea and put it on the paper very fast. So that's what works for me.
Yeah. So, what kind of what got you interested in writing in the first place as opposed to something else? Like, I know that you said you're a programmer, so what do you, this is sort of two questions in one, but you know, do you see yourself more of as a writer or more of a programmer or some combination of both? And what got you interested in either one?
Sure. So I got into, I think I've always been more of a writer than a programmer, but I got into programming because when I was young, I wanted to make video games because who didn't want to? They're so cool. What do games need? They need someone who can make art. And I thought, well, I can't do that. My sister can, I can't. So I cut that out. I thought, okay, maybe I could try writing. I'm like, I looked it up. I remember like being a kid looking up writing, like it's like super hard. It's hard to be a game writer. You know, almost impossible to get. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I won't be a writer for that. I'll try programming because every game needs programmers, and so that's how I learned to do programming. But like ever since I was a kid, just been I've been like a writer at heart. Like if I could like make as much money as I am now doing like writing, I would do. I would quit my programming job and immediately go into writing. I got into it sort of because I just like telling stories. I liked reading books a lot as a kid. Um, I remember my mom got me a book, some like books, like I think it's like character. One of them was like characters and viewpoints, which was a really interesting read on sort of how you can like literally like how to develop the right characters and also how the way you like tell your story in first person, third person, and the viewpoints of the characters can like change how you sort of read a passage in a book. So I go from that. I remember literally writing in like a notebook. I was trying to write like some silly story about how like I think a kid like grew like what was essentially Pokemon out of marbles they got from their teacher. Because
Hmm.
that's we. And when I was in elementary school, we got marbles in a bowl. Whenever we had good behavior, the bowl filled up. We got some sort of reward. So I tried writing it out that. Then I got older and I started writing like sort of fan fiction stuff because what else is a middle school kid supposed to do on a summer vacation at their grandma's house but write Ace Attorney fan fiction stuff? And as cringy as it might have been, I might not be as good as a writer if I didn't cut my teeth on. And since then, it's just been the same thing. I love telling stories. I want to share the cool, weird ideas that come out in my head, and the best way to do that, I figured, was I can write. Um, Sadly, writing doesn't make as much money if you're not New York Times best, seller. So practically, I just figured, okay, I'll learn programming. So maybe if one day I get into the game industry, I can use that. And if not, there are a lot of tech jobs that will pay good money. So that's how that sort of happened.
What kind of advice could you possibly give to someone who wants to be a writer for video games that you would want to have known starting out?
Ooh, that's good because actually I've learned quite a bit of advice. At a portfolio that has a variety of writing samples, bark sheets, which is basically literally an Excel sheet of. For those that don't know, barks, they're sort of like the things that characters say usually within the game. I'll give an example. Anytime someone's reloading in Call of Duty, someone had to write down what they said when they were reloading. And they said reloading or changing mag. That was likely a writer writing down what a character would say when the action of reloading was put into a bark sheet. You can look those up. There's a whole bunch of examples. Exposition samples are good for like setting a scene. Writing out quest line stories is also pretty good. I learned all these through some sort of writing courses I used to take for an online video game course. So I'm like, well, let me see if I can maybe find a video game writing job. Took the course, didn't get a job, but learned a lot of unique stuff. And this is like for like professional like writing, not like maybe like independent. I mean, it could still be useful in like independent hobbyist or like independent game development stuff. But if you want to sort of pursue that kind of thing, those are the sort of materials you need. Which things I wish I knew because I could have started my portfolio much earlier. Additionally, you're going to have to edit. I hate editing personally because I tend to think of the first draft I do something is really good, but you're going to have to edit because it just makes things better. Whether I'm not just talking about like typos, I'm talking about looking at a scene and going, I need to cut this out, this whole scene out, or replace it, or adjust it. And it's sometimes painful and it's really hard to do, but uh, any good writer worth their salt will know that the first draft is just a draft, as is the second, third, or fourth, and it's not until you've cut a lot of things you thought were perfect that you'll be able to kind of get the best piece of your writing material out. And I guess the last thing is, this isn't really like something I wish I'd known, but it's just generally good advice. Like, don't be afraid to write what comes to mind. Like, don't think like, oh man, this is crazy, this is weird. That's like, what do you think most writers like started? Most people don't make their magnum opus with their first stuff. They write some maybe cringy romance that they were inspired by in high school, or some sci-fi thing that's really similar to Star Wars, but you think it's cool. You learn a lot by just kind of writing and finding how your writing style is, what works, showing it off to people, getting their comments and feedback, and you might look back at it years later and go like, "What the hell was I doing?" but those are sort of the essential things you kind of have to go through to kind of grow your craft. And it's totally fine if it's not perfect the first 10, 20, 100 times. Every time, the next one's always going to be better. So be unabashed in your writing. Have no fears.
Yeah, that's really good advice. All three of those points. Definitely practice makes perfect for sure. You can't be afraid to get started and just, you know, do some work and do your best and improve. And that's always what I try to encourage as well. You said you started writing just sort of around middle school. At what point or what in particular maybe inspired you to do video games as opposed to just writing a book or anything else? Like what drew you to video games specifically? And maybe even potentially to Game of Fortune eventually.
Sure. Unlike a book or movie or other types of media, video games are interactive. Um, even if the interaction is simply the clicking of a choice. Um, and I always thought that was a pretty powerful thing. Um, and I'm a big fan of Ace Attorney. That's literally what kind of got me into like the video game writing thing, because it was also like writing a puzzle. That's what mysteries are, really. You've said this before. I'm sure you've said it in most of your newsletters. Mysteries are just puzzles we want people to solve, and there's lots of mystery books that are like that. But video games kind of literally add an element of you have to solve this to progress most of the time. And I always thought that was pretty amazing. And I always dreamed of being like, oh, maybe if I get lucky one day, maybe I can write for like the Ace Attorney deal. No, it's probably not going to happen. But I can make my own fun little like case ideas. I have good ideas. Oh, what if the murder weapon was this or X, Y, and Z happened? And instead of kind of writing a book, I could and go through like the process of publishing stuff. I can go onto this cool fan site, know how to figure out how to write it down and like put my ideas into an online engine and then present it to the world and then have them look at what I made, interact with it, and get their feedback. That's kind of the biggest draw to me. It's sort of the interactive element that you have with your player base and them feeling like, oh, maybe if I do this action, I'll get some other result. That's just what I thought was always cool. That's why I love these games so much. It's books aren't entirely passive. Mystery books do want you to kind of solve it, but a game just kind of demands it up, and I just kind of really like that. So
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. There's a level of interactivity in games that obviously books and movies and everything else can't really do. So we talked quite a bit about Ace Attorney's involvement in inspiring Game of Fortune. Going from general video game development and Ace Attorney fan creation stuff, what took you from Ace Attorney to Game of Fortune? It was just the desire to make your own original project, and were there any other influences other than Ace Attorney?
yes. So I'd actually say that the main inspiration for the Game of Fortune was actually Alice in Borderland, which I mentioned earlier. But what sort of took me into going that route.
Can you explain real quick for our listeners what Alice in Borderlands is? Because I've actually never heard of that or experienced it.
Oh,
so yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Alice in Borderland is a thriller manga. I'm not talking about the Netflix version, which is based off the manga, but essentially you could see either of those. About characters that are sort of trapped in this world where they have to play various sort of games to extend their passport in the Borderlands. If your passport runs out, a laser comes down from the sky, shoots you through the head, and you die. And you can also die in a whole bunch of other ways, through the games, through other people, and the series has a lot of different types of games. It's not just like it's not like a death game manga. It is a game theory manga. There are a bunch of different games, some that have to do with trusting other people, your physical abilities, your intellect, teamwork, like things like that. Like so many different ways to sort of design or not design a game, sort of interact with the game based on like what the main element of it is. And I thought it'd be really cool if I could sort of make a game in a similar vein where there's just like a ton of games with different kind of mechanics and ideas. Some of them are based purely on strength, endurance, how well can you deceive others, how well can you understand a puzzle, can you figure out certain things, and that's kind of why I use that as sort of the main inspiration for the game. In terms of like how to design the sort of call them mini games within the game itself. Whereas Ace Attorney and Danganronpa and these other games are great from a like a murder mystery detective sort of way. And there's occasionally there may be that in the game. I was more interested in being able to showcase the cast of characters interacting in different ways in different games because it shows off different parts of them. You may see a incredibly intelligent character struggle if a game involves physical exertion or deception and they're a very honest person. But you might also see them thrive in another situation where they can, rely on those talents, and the resulting differences from those cases allows me to explore those characters and show off lots of facets of not just the characters, but the way they interact with other characters, their environments. You get into their head. It's just, I think, it works really well in a when a big cast has a lot of ways to you can sort of explore them, as opposed to saying they have to solve a murder mystery. Not that it's bad. It's just it would get really old if I did that for every single mini game. So that's sort of the inspiration.
So I understand the influence of mystery games like Ace Attorney, Danganronpa, Zero Escape, and then there like you said, more of these battle of wits kinds of games or stories like Alice in Borderlands, Kaiji, and Liar Game. But there's another particular influence that you've talked about quite a lot, and it's actually visually apparent in some of the screenshots on the store page. A lot of your game, a lot of the Game of Fortune was inspired by Mario Party, right?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty simple. Mario Party, anyone who's played it, your band of four friends or former friends, if you played them and then unfortunately lost them to Mario Party, the game has usually 3 to 4 different types of mini games. There's a sort of 4-player mini game, which can be sometimes cooperative or combative. Most of the time it's combative, only one person wins. Like a 1 versus 3, and then 2 versus 2, and then sometimes a battle mini game where money gets distributed easily. I figured that it'd be really easy to implement those sort of same kind of ideas. Like, let's just have the people split up into different Mario Party-esque type games. There are some games that are very similarly inspired by Mario Party as they are on the storefront page. They have to play a game. Are they working together? Are they working as a team? Does the team work out well together? Are they against each other? Do they make truces? Do they, to take down someone who they perceive as a greater threat, even if it means that they might lose, so on and so forth. So there's also the fun element in Mario Party of really hating the people sometimes you interact with in those mini games, which certainly happens in the Game of Fortune, where people will just not like each other, even if even if they're working together, they just loathe and despise each other. But somehow they get through it, and they have to deal with that. Sadly, I was not able to get the rights to call the Game Fortune Party, but otherwise I would. But that's essentially Mario Party inspiration. There's some fun mini games I took ideas from. The general concept of how the battle mini games work is very fun, and I had a blast literally trying to think of, okay, how can I put these people into a Mario Party-esque game and have them develop or suffer or whatever.
Did you play a lot of Mario Party as a kid? What was your
Yes.
What would you say your favorite Mario Party game is?
Like mini game or like specific like?
Well, I'd like to know both actually.
Sure. Okay. My personal favorite Mario Party title is Mario Party 3. That's
Hmm.
the last one on the N64. I grew up playing that one. Uh, I just had a lot of fun memories playing with my siblings on that one and my dad. Have a fun little battle, like one versus one mode. The music in the maps is very charming. The It's literally a board. If you ever take a look at the Mario Party maps and look at all the fun little details on all of them, there's like, oh, there's a bunch of snowmen playing around in the snow, and one of them is like an ice cream cone, or things like that, which I kind of really love. As for my favorite Mario Party minigame, um, God, there's just so many to pick from. But okay, this is going to be an obscure one. I'm not sure. I think it's from Mario Party 2. I can't remember the name. I think it's called like Parallels Falling. But basically, what it is you're running like an almost like a diagonal way on these sort of floating platforms. And if you fall off, you lose. And if you make it, you're the first one to make it to the end, you win. It's funny to me because it was the janky N64 controllers. There was a bunch of horrible input errors. But I remember distinctly one memory of when my like everyone else was gone. I was the last person playing, and I remember triumphantly saying, "My name is Kenneth Norris, and and I immediately fall through like a gap and lose." And my entire family is like, we're all laughing because it's like something you write like in a script, like the hero is gonna win, and then they fall on their own two heels and then win. But it's very fun one for me.
Yeah, that one's the platform peril, right? That's the one where
That for apparel,
yeah, you run.
yes.
I love that one too. Um, yeah, you're running in the clouds. To me, it felt like more, it was fun for me because it was like a 3D platformer kind of thing, and I always loved those too. Getting to play that in a Mario Party game was fun. And to your point, it's like that was also one of the ones that so many games no one could win, right? Sometimes everybody would
Yes,
lose. Does that ever pop up in Game of Fortune? Is there like a situation where maybe all four players just don't make it?
that is a scenario that can happen. In fact, I don't know if it was shown in that route, but there are routes in the game where it is mentioned like, oh, these four people might all just die. Or we might be in a situation where we might all die. So yes, that is a situation that can happen. And it was something I considered.
And Mario Party 3, I played all of them starting with the first one, and
Ooh, nice.
yeah, I never actually owned the first one though. We would rent it from the store, so I never got my hands on it. I ended up playing a lot of Mario Party 2 and then also a lot of Mario Party 3. I love the duel mode where you could do that. It was a very unique mode of like one versus one, and you would pick a partner, like an enemy character. Do you remember that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I love that's my favorite mode.
Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff from those early Mario Party games. I've not played the more recent ones. I know they've done some sort of remake kind of stuff lately with like Mario Party for the Nintendo Switch or something like that. I've not played any of those. Have you?
I actually have not, but they all seem to be pretty good. But I'm just always gonna be a sucker for the classics. Like the remakes aren't. They're missing some maps. They're missing some. They don't have the old fashioned battle minigame. I don't know if they actually have them on like the classic system that they have on the Switch.
Mm.
But I mean, the remakes are fine. I just honestly haven't had a chance to play them because me and my siblings are so far away now.
Mm.
Physically, not emotionally. We're still on good terms.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
um, Also, one last question for the Mario Party topic. Do you have a
Mm-hmm.
favorite board to play on?
Oh, yes, I do. My favorite board is I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's the C one for Mario Party 3. Like
Okay.
do blooper duper something. I think it's blooper something blooper. I think I remember that. But I remember it because it's just like there's a shark that will literally hit you with a torpedo. There's a blooper that calls on its mom to move you to the other side of the board. There's a giant fish that threatens to like eat you and spit you out to the other side of the map if you fail his challenge. And also the music just it's a bop. Mario Party 3's music is a bop, and I love it.
Yeah, that one's the Deep Bloober Sea. That's the name.
There it is,
There
Deep
you go.
Blooper Sea. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with Mario Party 3 as well growing up. So that's definitely one of my favorite game series in addition to all the mystery stuff. Is every mini game in Game of Fortune inspired by like a Mario Party game, or are there some that you actually took, you
They are
know?
not all Mario Party
Okay,
games.
they're not all Mario Party games though. Some of them are
Yes, some
unique. Yeah.
yes, some of them are inspired by other games. Some of them I just kind of came up with random stuff on my own. It's a mix.
Hmm. And were there any characters that were inspired by Mario characters?
No, actually, they're none of them are distinctly Mario. Actually, okay, no. The answer is no. But there are two characters which they wear red and green,
Hmm.
and they're siblings. So that's the closest you could get to maybe a Mario a character. I think they're even noted as maybe having like mushroom hats, even though they're
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
mushroom exactly. But the
Just
closest thing that you can get to that.
I that's immediately what I thought of when I saw those characters, and they were called Sisters. I'm like, Mushroom Sisters sounds like a Mario Brothers thing, but
There you go. Sadly, no, they're not Mario property inspired.
okay, let's get to talking about the Game of Fortune in a little more detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Okay, first question might be the first question anybody has been asking, which is why is there so much emphasis on the number four? You kind of touched upon this earlier, but I'm just wondering, like, is it a special number to you specifically? Is there why not three or five or seven? You know, isn't seven more of a lucky number?
um. Well, it's four because four works very well when you want to put characters in a weird death gamey scenario. There's no specific reason why. Well, I don't think it could have been a huge number like seven, or a prime number for that matter, like seven. But the huge emphasis on four was there's a lot of good sort of imagery you can do with four. There's four-leaf clovers. I'm pretty sure in some cultures, four is either a lucky or unlucky number. So I thought that would be also pretty cool. Um, it's similar to the word fortune, which I thought was, you can't really deal with a lot of numbers. But four. But again, the reason four is sort of important for the in the game itself is sort of what it represents for the person running the game. You've finished a round. You understand why it's special in that sense. But it kind of just worked out like mechanically. I think I've explained before why four worked mechanically. It's easier to work with like a set of four characters in each sort of mini game and then sort of explore them. It's easy to make four games that lead to a finale, and just have it work out in that sort of sense. So I'd say that originally it was sort of the idea of just having like a four themed like death game, and then expanding on how can I add that concept into more things. Oh, we'll make it four characters. We'll have it be four rounds. We'll have it be, uh, four of the reward, and so on and so forth.
This is quite a coincidence, but one of the, I guess you could call her a main character, Belle, who's the host of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Her birthday is April 4th, which is also my birthday. So,
What do you know?
yeah.
Well, that is a coincidence.
It makes sense though. 0404. It makes sense, right? For a character running the game.
Mm-hmm.
She's also a magical character, and I guess it should be a question I should ask is why did you choose to make it more of a magical setting as opposed to like a more realistic interpretation?
That's fair. I'm trying to say this without making it sound okay. Screw. I was gonna say it. It made things easier. When you make things supernatural in a sense, you're kind of given a bit more leeway. You don't have to sort of explain all the mechanics of how how can there be so many different get game kind of things. I can just say it's magic. Uh, Not that there's anything wrong with someone wanting to do a more realistic take, but I was uh, it sort of worked. There's it worked for the setting I was going in my head. Um, and it's also fun to kind of have a sort of whimsical, mystical, divine figure that kind of do whatever do all these amazing things, and this is what she's doing. Um, and it works in the broader setting of the where the game takes place, which you will find out in due time. But generally, it's I just found that it made things easier, and you know, supernatural and magical sort of settings are fun.
Well, I mean, it's totally fair because, one of the things that happens is there's a lot of death and destruction going on, and one of the things that
Hmm.
Belle can do is she can heal the injured wounds, right? So a lot of things can happen in like one round that don't carry over to the next, and like otherwise people would be walking around with major issues going on. From a plot convenience perspective, I sort of understand that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to have those games with those consequences going on, right?
Yeah, so there's also a little bit of hmm, there's a little bit of fun and also people kind of uh just like knowing that, and how would you approach that, like if you're in a serious, like a game where someone says, hey, if you lose this you die, but if you don't die, then I'll heal you up totally. You might act a bit
Mm-hmm.
riskier. You might do things that might put you in extreme mortal peril that most people would not survive a day in, but if you can just survive the game with, hey, you can handle that. um it adds another sort of fun layer, I think. It's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like how much are you willing to put yourself through to win?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and knowing that you'll be fine if you win afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might still not be able to do what they need to do because it's like that hurts too much. It's kind of like stuff like that. So yes, definitely like plot convenience. It would be really hard to get sprites of people being disfigured and missing limbs and things like that. Uh, but
Mm-hmm.
things worked out, so I don't have to worry about that, thankfully.
Yeah, it also reminds me a lot of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in some of those parts where like the main characters get attacked and they just like get brutally destroyed, but then they have like magical powers that heal them afterward, and it's like, it leads to some pretty interesting episodes of that show. But yeah, there's a lot of brutality and destruction in Game of Fortune. I was kind of surprised by that, especially in the I don't know if it's always the first game, but in the first game that was on the route that I picked, it was pretty brutal. Um, that was the mini game Pick Your Poison, and
Yep.
it's it's a very bold decision to put that first as the first thing the player experiences because, well, I'll say it like this: there's a decision that you have to make early on, which is,
Mm.
do you want to stay with your partner or split up from them? And I'm thinking, okay, well, I kind of want to stick with them, right? I don't want to split up from
Most
them.
people do.
Yeah, I'm sure most people do, right? Most people want to stick with the partner. Now, the catch is that you're immediately thrown into a game that puts you actually up against this partner, and it's pretty brutal because this is not just like playing a game of marbles with them. This is like you're you're essentially inflicting pain on the other person, and you have to figure out, is there a way to get out of it with both people surviving, or are you going to have to sacrifice one person or the other? And that is like such a compelling first game to put people through instead of just going with some generic thing. Um, the whole thing is very, you know, even the music during that time is very tense and serious as opposed to a whimsical sort of thing. So, I mean, what was your thought process behind putting such a crucial uh, conflict right at the forefront of the story?
Yes, that is a very deliberate choice, and it's to really hammer home the idea that it's shit gets real. And I think it's personally very important in a sort of thriller or death game or anything like that to like show how serious the stakes are. Like if the first game you're in is like, oh, everything's so nice and we can work together and everything's gonna go swell, then I think it kind of pulls away from like your expectations. Like you kind of want to. I think like deep down, I think most people kind of want to see like something not like brutal or torturous, but it's like like this, like some tough decision making. It makes you feel like, oh god, this is not an easy thing to do. And putting, Clyde in that situation as the first game, I think really hammers home. Like it first of all, it does a really good job setting up his development like further on that route. But it also helps to set the expectations to the player as to how things can go. And like this isn't gonna be like fun and easy. It's gonna be, painful. There's gonna be tough choices you have to make. And presenting that early, I think helps prep the player for what's to come throughout the whole game. And like, I personally just think it's a really good scene. Like it's a good thing to have your main character at odds with someone that they really care about, and like having to decide, can they save the other person? If not, who's more important?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fun dynamic to explore with, and I think it's almost essential in these kind of games to have that sort of thing be placed early.
Yeah, definitely something to show that the stakes are high and it's a serious kind of game. On that note, we should probably mention why Clyde is even participating in the game in the first place. He has, correct me if I'm wrong, he's got a terminally ill family member, and the game will grant him a wish to make her better.
It is described as a treatment center to him over the dark web. Advise people, don't trust things you see over the dark web. They're usually not true. And he finds it out very quickly. But yes, he is essentially, trying to help out his, terminally ill mother. And his desperation maybe doesn't make the best decisions. But that's sort of how he gets roped into this whole thing. Finds a way to make it work, hopefully. Trying to save the spoilers for the people who might not have played the game yet.
Right. Based on his decisions. Maybe he will, maybe he won't, I guess.
Maybe he will, maybe he won't. The game is brutal. You never really know what'll happen.
There, a little bit about Clyde and his backstory, because I think this might be relatable to a lot of people. Clyde is a college dropout who works as a dishwasher, and we learn that he struggles with video game addiction. I think that probably resonates with a lot of people. Was there any particular reason you chose to write that for the protagonist? Why is that his backstory? Unless there's something that goes into that deeper in the other routes that I haven't seen yet, but it seems pretty interesting already. So, yeah.
Fun fact: it's my backstory. I went to college in New York, Rochester Institute of Technology. Went there for one semester, played way too much League of Legends, and got put on academic suspension. Then became a dishwasher for about a year, and then went out to another college. That first year, of after getting kicked out, probably the most depressed and sad and reckless I ever felt my entire life. Thankfully, not there anymore. But it's a very, like you said, it's a very, I'm not sure I want to say relatable, but it's something I think a lot of people can maybe relate to. Like in some sense of feeling like they failed someone because they didn't live up to their expectations or because of their own personal failings. And I was able to, it's easy to write Clyde when it's like, yeah, I've been through this. I know how this feels. And, sadly I did not get a friend at the dishwashing place I went to, unfortunately. But that part's fiction. But the rest of it was sort of like just from the heart, really. It's like, yeah, I know how bad it feels to kind of have your life like thrown in a different direction because you got hooked onto something and you couldn't stop, even if you knew it was bad. Like you have people yelling at you or telling you this is going to end well, and then when they're right, you can't really say anything because it's like, you were right, folks. I shouldn't have played those games too much. It's totally ruined my life, and now it's shit. So, writing Clyde in that way, it's easy to kind of see how he might, struggle with certain aspects of himself. why he might also not, but also in a weird way, it's also he leverages his former addiction, or in a way that kind of helps him, at least. Not to say that this happens all the time, but it's if you play a lot of games, you tend to sort of think in certain ways. Try and approach problems in a certain way, and he tries to use that in some of the games that he plays. So that's sort of Clyde's deal. And again, this is a work of fiction. I promise that I have not, been in any death game, and I have not done anything untoward or horrible to people. I'm a good man.
That is an interesting point, though. That as a game developer, right? What is your take on video game addiction, or even just maybe social media addiction or technology addiction? Like, I know personally, these are very addicting things and are designed to be addictive. Mm-hmm. So, when I design games, I have that in the back of my head. Like, okay, am I designing something that is going to be too manipulative? What are your thoughts on balancing like being a game developer, but also, being aware that video game addiction is a thing and it can lead to a lot of bad outcomes for people?
Yeah. Oh boy, I could really go on this one. All right. So, having lived through video game addiction, it's absolutely terrible. And yet at the same time, I also don't think I'd be who I was today if I didn't like video games. Now, obviously, you can like something without being addicted. Mm-hmm. To think it's a matter of, I don't even want to say self-control, because like we've mentioned, some of these games are designed to prey upon parts of your brain to get into a dopamine loop. They make you want to come back to them over and over again, things like that. Personally, I don't worry about that thing when I make my games, because first of all, my games are sort of one and done kind of deal. You kind of can't keep coming back to it. I mean, you could do some replayability for some things, but it's not like, say, like a MOBA or other kind of games where there's a feedback loop game, like gameplay feedback loop that's designed to have you coming back and spending more and more money.
Right. It's not endless. It has a finite end to it.
Right. So I don't worry about that in that particular sense. But having lived through video game addiction, still trying to make sure I don't fall into it again. I worry, I guess, about I don't know if I'm gonna start sounding like my parents, but about the future generation.
Yeah.
Because I've having know what that can do to you, and now seeing what it's doing to the next generation. Not like Zoomers, or I mean like the Gen Alpha or whatever they're calling it. Mm-hmm. Because they're now being shoved social media and tablets and games like these at a really young age, and I'm seeing kids have tantrums if you take their tablets away. I literally had a family reunion. I saw one of my younger cousins, couldn't have been 5 or older, took his phone away, and he just was inconsolable. He's another kid just wanted to talk with him, and all he was doing was playing his game. And now this is painful, because this is what my parents said to me, and it's oh, it hurts, but now I understand.
Yeah.
It's rough. All jokes aside, it's the stuff that can really screw with your development, your growth, and this all sounds the same. You probably people have heard it over and over again. But I really can't stress enough that you got to sometimes be really careful about this stuff. I watch a lot of, I don't know if you're familiar with him or even heard of him, this Dr. K guy.
Mm-hmm.
I watch a lot of his, great.
Healthy Gamer.
A lot of healthygamer.gg.
Yeah.
Literally, I do coaching from them, because it's I'm still trying to make sure I keep my life steady on the right track. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wanted to put a little bit of that into Clyde as someone who's a bit lost and trying to figure out as to what he wants to do. Not to pull it back to my game, but that just it just kind of came up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's even now I still play games, but thankfully for me, it's not as bad as it used to be. I can function now. I don't skip work or anything like that. But I kind of there's some aspects of the game industry or games that are like built in a way to like hook people in that loop and like make them waste tons of money. And it's like I know you need to make money, but like there's got to be a better way. It's like I can only imagine. Like I feel like I'm like a lucky person. Like I got through it. I thankfully had a supportive family, and I had the means to kind of recover from that. But I don't think like everyone in the world has that sort of that privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So I count my blessings, and I hope that people who do need the help can manage to find it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any sort of like, how do you know, like, what was what was the sort of the point where you realized that um, there was a problem and you needed to fix it? Was it like,
Mm,
did it happen overnight, or was it just a slow, like, okay, this
it
is
was.
getting worse and worse
It
and worse?
wasn't. It mixed sort of both. It was sort of like again getting. I remember literally not going to classes when I was in college, thinking to myself, "What am I doing? Like, I need to like go to class and do stuff." But at the other part of my mind was like defeatist. It was like, "There's no point. We've already missed out on so many classes. What's it matter?"
Mm-hmm.
And then literally getting kicked out to college because of it was sort of a you can't kind of run from it anymore. It's
Mm-hmm.
like no uh non-addictive person can play video games like 12 hours a day and hope to succeed in like college, especially taking 16 credits. Now maybe that was also an issue, but you
Mm-hmm.
know another story for the time.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take 16 credits as a freshman kid. It's not a good idea. um and then sort of working through it and like seeing like how much you get irked by just being asked like, hey, can you get off the game and do something like and help me with X, Y, or Z. Like I remember when I was I think I was seeing a therapist or something like that, and I was able to admit like, yeah, I always like I'm always playing like League, like even if and then he said, hey, look, why don't you give me your password and I'll change it. And I was like, that's a great idea. And I gave it to him. And I remember being in like agony for like the first day, it's like, oh, this is fine. The second day, like, oh, I want to play League, and trying it. And then the next day, the next day, the next day, it was like agony and thinking to myself, like, I almost want to ask for it back. But it's like, if you do, like, you're just admitting the problem isn't fixed. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of gets your brain thinking, like, okay, we really do need to fix this somehow. Like just not having access to a League account, like, is this much pain for you?
Mm-hmm.
So it was sort of like the immediate shock, and then like of like being first like, yes, this is a problem, and then slowly kind of seeing like all the other aspects of it, and then trying to recover from it in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think it is relatable for a lot of people. I mean, at least I thought it was because, I've played too many games in my life. I mean, I think about how, there's a lot of, you could argue, a lot of time spent on video games that you could be spending on other things. Maybe that's not quite the same, but it's it does make you wonder, like, okay, am I spending my time wisely and being productive about it? Or is there a point where I'm spending too much time on the games to the detriment of other aspects of my life? And I think a lot of people do um, go too far into it. Ironically, as a game developer, I'm willing to admit that. But um, do you find that maybe as a good strategy for this, for overcoming this sort of thing, do you think that maybe people should try to replace their gaming habits with a more productive habit, like exercising or going outside or things like that?
Oh, absolutely. And I know that for many people, or whoever's listening to this, it might be hard. You might think to yourself, why would I like go out and exercise when I can play my game? Not to mock them, like this is literally
Mm-hmm.
like how you'll think.
Mm-hmm.
You might even like you might even think at the time it's a good idea, and it is a good idea. But the moment you have to actually pull yourself away, it'll be really hard. And to those people, I'd say, just like you have to try it at least once. And if you need help, if you need someone to keep you accountable, someone who can just like go with you there, to start it up, then absolutely do it. Like personally for me, I go to CrossFit like 3 days a week. Probably not the exercise most people would think to do, but it works for me. And it works because first of all, physical activity is just good in general. Doesn't matter if it's like
Mm-hmm.
walking, hiking, running, swimming, CrossFit, whatever. It's good for your body. It's good for your brain. You'll find that sometimes your best ideas might just come from the gym right now. One of the characters in my game literally came from when I was at the gym, and I'm like, wow, I should put that character in the game, or a concept of that character in the game. Not to say that you should just do exercise for idea ideas, but it comes in handy. But more importantly, it's sort of good to have a balance of just things that aren't just one like game. Geez, I really am sounding a lot like my parents. Generally, I would say it's great to have a varied interest because it keeps your mind fresh. It keeps you from immediately going back to the temptation of games, and for some people, it'll always be there, and I understand that. But at least it gives you something to kind of help fight against it. Like maybe, like even it's just something simple like just going out for a walk, or maybe going to read. And I know that another thing that might be tough is like this isn't as fun as game, and that'll be probably the hardest part of all. You'll do it and you'll still feel unsatisfied. But honestly, if I tell you, if you keep at it long enough, you'll just start to. It won't feel like the pull on games will be as strong. Like it might still be, but it'll be lighter. You'll feel like I don't really feel like I need to play games. That was the strangest thing that happened to me when I just started like going like I don't really want to play games right now, and that was like a shock to me. It's like I love games, and of course I still do. But it was like the fact I could go. Actually, yeah, I won't stay up till like 1 a.m. playing like a video game. It's like 9 o'clock. I'm hungry. I'm gonna make dinner, and then maybe I'll like go to bed early and not play a game even though I have time. Like that there is like the best moment when you're like you sort of feel free. It's not like a pull on you. It's literally like just a thing you might want to do for fun from time to time, and you can say no to it whenever you want. So
yeah,
that's my advice.
I think that's great advice. So I do kind of hope that at least I do kind of think that mystery games in particular, I kind of see them as like maybe the most productive kind of game because usually you can avoid a lot of the issues, I would argue, that these addicting game loops have with mystery games. You kind of see it where, um, it is kind of a finite experience. I mean, maybe you can make an infinitely looping mystery game that's endless, and especially with generative AI these days, you can just generate infinite mysteries or whatever. But, there's usually at least something educational about the game. There's something that maybe is more mentally beneficial than other kinds of games. So that's kind of how I look at it in terms of being a game developer and like working on like if I'm going to work on a specific type of game, I want to work on one that actually benefits the people who play it more than it harms them. And that's how I see mystery games as a whole genre is like you're teaching people things. It's an educational experience. Every mystery is a question that the player has to learn how to figure out the answer to. And it helps on both just the educational front and also the critical thinking front. And at the very least, that's something that a lot of people can probably use these days. So do you feel similarly about mystery games, or do you take issue with that?
I don't take issue with it. I'll say I never thought of games. I always thought of mystery games as kind of like puzzles, I guess. And in that sense, they're like, like any particular puzzle's like a brain teaser. It's makes you think. I hadn't really thought of it being as sort of a like the most productive style of game. I'm sure that many people will argue with you on actually this genre is the most productive, or this one, or this one.
I'm sure they will.
I'm sure they will, and I'm sure if they get on this podcast, maybe we'll argue with you about it.
Yeah.
But I think it's very, like personally, I think mystery games are very good at getting people to sort of like just think because you kind of have to think in a mystery game. And in that sense, I do think it's very productive, and I think generally it's probably one of the least kind of problematic genres in the sense of there's not like a monetization loop that people can get sucked in. There's no, as far as I know, thankfully, no horrible like big I don't even know how to say it. Like, there's nothing like inherently evil or bad about mysteries. Now, the content you put into it could be problematic. That's on the people who put it in there. But mystery, by in its own nature, is not an issue. Um, I've always loved them mainly because I like to see what other people kind of have for what they consider to be a good mystery. Like, what am I trying to solve? What am I trying to figure out? What should I be focusing on? In that sense, it's kind of neat to be able to see other people's like how their brains work. Like, what do they consider to be a good mystery? Is it trying to solve a murder? Is it trying to figure out who this mysterious person is stealing a bunch of, I don't know, like diamond rings or whatever? Um, so I say that generally, I think that mystery game dev definitely like has the amazing potential to kind of showcase that. And in mystery games in general, um, I think they stick with people a lot more than other types of genres do. Mainly because they are like a one time you experience it, it's there, that's all there is, and you enjoy it, as opposed to other genres where there's sort of a loop where you're sort of supposed to enjoy it, piece by piece or game by game. Um, so I think that's probably the biggest strength is that it sticks with you. People will remember like their favorite case or least favorite case from like Ace Attorney or Danganronpa or and things like that more so than they'll probably remember the one time they got like on a 10 kill streak in Call of Duty and did something like that. No shame to them. It's just the way that mystery games work in my life. So that's
Yeah,
really cool.
they definitely resonate emotionally because of the amount of emphasis on story, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about solving a puzzle. It's about connecting with the characters emotionally in the story and having that experience that relates to real life, hopefully in some way. And something that I love about mystery games is usually there is a pretty deep conflict going on that can translate into solving a real life problem. So, you know, lots of any murder mystery has to arise from some sort of interpersonal conflict, right? So you start understanding people better, you start dealing with conflict resolution better. There's all kinds of benefits to mystery games that I think, at the very least, we can say that they're less harmful than other kinds of games. Productive, some people may take issue with that. I would even just start by saying at least harmful, right? Um, than other kinds of games, or at least I'd like to think so.
I agree.
As for your present and your future, what are you? Is there anything you can say about what you're currently working on right now, and what are your plans for future games?
Sure. So, as you mentioned earlier, I am working on a sequel project to the Game of Fortune. I've actually been getting some various art assets prepped for potentially. I'm not sure on the date exactly, but at least being able to announce the title, and then from there, just kind of keep working on the game. If it takes as long as Game of Fortune did, then it might be a couple of years till it's out. But I kind of at least want to get the word and some eyes on it. I think I may have already shown a sprite of a certain character, but that's generally what the plan is. The plan is to get what I need to have the game be announced, and then sort of just keep working on it as I did with the last game. So I'm actually excited. Now that I'm back from my trip, I've been feeling really energized to get back to it. So I am working and I'm chugging along, and hopefully you'll all be able to see what's coming up next.
That is fantastic to hear. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be looking forward to that project. And as my last couple of questions here, um, what advice would you give to someone who wants to make a mystery game but has zero experience doing so?
Ooh, Jesus. Okay, all right. Advice time. All right. No experience. Well, I'd say first, you might not think you have any experience making a game, but you probably have something. Whether it's your ability to write, or do music, or draw, or anything. You really any particular thing. You start that off as your base. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, as we mentioned earlier, it's totally fine to go for something short and small, or to shoot for the moon and start your little ambitious project and learn along the way before you come back to it later. I think some really good advice is absolutely make use of the resources you have available. There are a lot, and I mean a lot, of like videos and things on sort of how to make a mystery game or any game in particular. But if you want to make a mystery game, I'm sure there's lots of resources, materials on, how to get started on that. Don't be afraid to reach out to other people who you think might be interested in it. If not to work together, then at the very least bounce some ideas off and get you excited to be able to start. And honestly, like, play some other games too. Like, sometimes you'll find the biggest inspiration through someone else's projects, like I did for mine. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with going, I like what that person did, I'm going to try and make what they did. And then as you work on it, you'll find like your own sort of I don't know, your own spark, your own thing that you added to it that makes it uniquely your own. And I think another piece of advice is, be easy on yourself. Like, don't say, if this isn't like a perfect 10 out of 10, it's not worth doing. If I can't get this done within 3 months, I'm, never doing it again. Like, it's okay to take your time and to start and stop, or maybe sometimes just refocus your ideas onto something else entirely. Game dev is not a sprint. Those are game jams usually, but generally, like, game development is a process. It requires a lot of work. You have to meet and talk with different people to get things you need, unless you're entirely solo, in which case you're amazing. I don't know why you need my advice if you do everything on your own. But even people who work alone, they still have to take the time to make everything they need, to put it all together, to edit, to enhance, to polish. And that can take a wear and tear on your brain as you sometimes look at other people and go, geez, I've been working on this thing for months or years, and it's still not as good as what other people make. Give yourself the benefit of being a first-time developer and knowing that it doesn't have to be perfect. If you can just make anything, that's good enough. And that you probably have heard this, from all sorts of inspirational quotes or media or whatever, but it really does ring true that something is better than nothing, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, or even the decent, or even like the maybe mediocre, because nobody starts off great. So give yourself some time to kind of find out where you think your expertise lies, and just make something, because we all love mystery games and we all want to play more of them. And every time we finish one, we want to look at them like, all right, what's the next thing I can eat? So be the next thing, because I need more. I need more games to play, please.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Play games, but not too many of them, right?
Yeah, don't get addicted. Other good advice: don't get addicted to games.
Yeah, but yeah, it is really an inspirational story that you had that going on, and then dropped out of college, but then here you are, and you're making games, you're doing really well with them, and you even, you won that competition with Reaplaced. So that was, never count yourself out, right?
We did that, though. I'll definitely take credit for the writing.
Wouldn't have happened without your writing, that's for sure. Final question: where can listeners go to find more information about you and your projects?
Of course. So it's a bit quiet these days, but I have a Discord specifically for the Game of Fortune, and future projects will be posted in that. You can follow me on Twitter. That is also, I should probably get better about posting that, but I do make posts on Twitter, which I will post like teasers for characters and other information about the games. Reach out there. And if for whatever reason you want to email me, well, I guess you could email me, but that would be, it'd be strange.
What's the name of your Twitter handle that people can follow?
Sure. You can follow me at ZetaKen3K1.
Okay, cool.
And then should I just give I think the invite link for my game is it's both in the game. I think it's on the itch.io page, and I think it's on the Steam page for Game of Fourtune.
Yeah, it's on there. So if people want to join the Discord, you can go to the Steam page for Game of Fortune, and you can join the Discord and talk about the game with everyone else who has been playing it. But yeah, that concludes our interview, our discussion. You got to be lucky number one, the first person to do this, so I greatly appreciate your decision to try this out for us. And it's been really an enjoyable hour and a half. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and get to know you over the past year. So I'm definitely personally looking forward to the next projects that you put out there.
Thank you for taking your time. This is really fun. I can't wait to see what it sounds like and be horrified at my own voice. But this is great. I hope that the other devs do this too, because I didn't think I'd be talking about certain subjects, but I'm kind of glad that I did. So they should too.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one.
It's a pleasure. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye. That concludes today's Mystery Gamedev Podcast episode. To join our community of fans and developers of mystery-themed video games, go to mysterygamedev.com and subscribe to our newsletter for weekly updates and more podcast episodes. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.